Hey, what's up, guys? I just wanted to go over. I mentioned in our initial video on Selly's channel that, I was going to use this channel to talk about things that I care about, and there's obviously a ton of stuff that I care about, and I want to try to make videos about things as I'm feeling them. I wanted to make a video tonight to go over the fights that happened this past weekend, the UFC fights, number one, because they were awesome. It was possibly the best card of the year, at least the best main card of the year, because the fights all delivered. I'll also go over the fight that's coming up. Paige Van Zandt's fight is coming up on the 17th. And then also I wanted to talk a little bit about this painful Cowboys game this past weekend. So the first thing about the fights, I wasn't gonna order them originally. I normally try to watch almost every pay-per-view, but this one I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it at first. I hadn't planned on ordering it. I love watching Holloway. Holloway's a great fighter. I love watching him fight, but I pretty much thought he was gonna railroad Pettis, and I just wasn't that interested in the other fights. But once I talked to Sally about it and let slip that Cowboy was fighting, she was all about it. She wanted to order it. She's like, "Oh, are you kidding me? Cowboy's fighting? We gotta order that." So we ordered it. I ordered it on my PlayStation 4 with the live events viewer, and I watched it on my big screen that we have in our bedroom, and it was fucking awesome. I think that's how I'll order them from now on, because ordering a pay-per-view through Charter is a gamble. Basically, I've ordered pay-per-views through them where I could only watch it in Spanish. I've ordered pay-per-views from Charter where I couldn't watch it in high definition, even though I paid for high definition. I've had half of a card not be able to watch half a card because the channel just wasn't coming in, and so I missed the first half of the card. So I'm not going to be ordering pay-per-views through them anymore, and I'll just do it on my PS4 from now on because it worked out so well. But anyway, so I'm not going to really talk about the prelims because I didn't watch most of them. I watched a couple of the prelim fights, and there weren't any fights really that stuck out to me, obviously, other than Lando Venata. Lando Venata landed a crazy spinning head kick and knocked out John McDessie, which, if anybody who's seen John McDessie fight, he is not a joke. That dude can fight, and obviously he's a striker too. He's a kickboxer. And so for Lando Venata to go in there and knock him out with a spinning head kick is, at the very least, to say impressive. And Lando Venata, he impressed the shit out of me in his debut. His UFC debut was on short notice against El Kukui, Tony Ferguson, at 155 on like 3 days' notice. He's going to fight one of the most dangerous guys at 155, which is the most dangerous division, and on 3 days' notice, he almost knocked out Tony Ferguson in the first round. And only because El Kukui's the shit did he survive that and then come back, and I am pretty sure he submitted him. I'm pretty sure he submitted him in the second round. But in the first round, Lando Venata had Tony all kinds of fucked up and almost finished him. So that guy is a guy to watch. Lando Venata. He is one to keep an eye on, especially at 145. He is quick. He's got excellent technique, clean, and obviously he's got knockout power in his kicks and punches. And because he beat a very reputable opponent pretty handily. Now, getting started on the main card with Jordan Meehan and Emil Mek. Now, Emil Mek was making his debut. He's a big Norwegian Viking guy. He's funny. He's funny looking, and he was funny on all of his pre-interviews and all this stuff coming up to the fight. He tried to bring a battle axe with him to the press conference, and like they wouldn't let him in with his battle axe, obviously, but and he ended up having to actually leave it in the arena because he couldn't get back through customs with the axe, so he ended up having to leave that axe in Canada. But that was a great fight. Now it was an odd fight, especially for Jordan Meehan. I felt like Meehan looked great in the first round because I could tell that, although I had never seen Emil Mech fight, I could tell Mech is a good fighter. Like he looked well rounded. He had great technique and good hands, and then he also seemed to have all the skills he needed in the grappling game. Which actually ended up winning him this fight. But in the first round, he didn't show his takedowns, but he showed the ability to go through scrambles and transition from striking to grappling seamlessly. So he's obviously well-rounded, and he obviously knows what he's doing, and he's in the UFC for a reason. Especially making his debut against an established guy like Jordan Meehan for the first fight of a main card. The UFC expects a lot from Emil Mech, and it was obvious why. Now, Meehan came out, and he looked awesome in the first round. He was controlling the action. He was landing his strikes. He landed an overhand elbow. He threw a jab, and then he feinted with the right, and then threw an overhand elbow. I almost knocked over the camera, and landed it. It was beautiful. On the ground, he was transitioning seamlessly, and it looked like Jordan Meehan, and it looked like the Jordan Meehan that we remember, and he was fighting great. And then I don't know what happened between the first and second rounds. It looked like to me, and it seemed like to me from that point forward that he decided that he wasn't going to win this fight. That I don't know if he got tired. I don't know if it was an adrenaline dump. He has been out for a long time, and it was his first fight back since being out, so I don't know if he just had an adrenaline dump and just couldn't muster the energy, but he came out completely flat in the second and third rounds, and Mech did the smart thing. He stood with him a little bit, but mostly he took him down, controlled him on the ground, and beat him up a little bit. Once he had him down, he did just enough to keep the fight there. He did just enough ground and pound, transitioned just enough to maintain position and not get stood up. And so he fought smart, and he won his UFC debut against a very good opponent. And so, all respect for Emil Mech. All congratulations, on his debut and his win. But I don't know what the fuck happened to Jordan Meehan. I don't know what happened in that fight. I don't know why in the second and third round he looked like he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be fighting. It looked like he showed up for a paycheck, which is fine. I understand that. But in the first round he looked great. And so I don't know why. I don't know what happened between rounds. I don't know why he went from looking awesome to looking like he didn't want to be there in a matter of a minute between rounds. So that was my thoughts on that fight. That I'm interested in how Emil Mech looks going forward. He was an interesting fighter. I think that he could do a lot for European fighting because we haven't had many Norwegian fighters. We've got the Polish fighters are coming up. They're on the upscale with Joanna and obviously the other guys that have been in the UFC for a little while. But the Norwegian fighters, we haven't really heard much out of them, so for him to come in and make a splash, that's awesome. But I think Jordan Meehan needs to decide whether he wants to fight or not. The guy retired, and he sat out for 2 years. He came back. He obviously still has all of his skills, but he didn't look like he wanted to win. So, and that's easy for me to say. Of course, I'm not a fighter. I want to put that out there. If I'm going to be reviewing fights, and it's the same with any sport. Obviously, I have nothing but respect for professional athletes, and you can't know what the situation is like unless you're in it and feeling it from their perspective. But, I'm going to be giving my opinion, especially in baseball. I'll be giving my opinion, and I'll also be talking about maybe, some situations where I would have done something different. I played a lot of baseball, and obviously it's not major league level. And obviously I don't believe that I'm as good as any of these people, but I am going to be giving my opinion. As far as fighting goes, though, I hate motherfuckers who get on the internet and they're like, oh, this guy's afraid to fight that guy, or oh, this guy was being a pussy, this guy was running from him the whole time, I hate it when the fans boo when they're on the ground. I fucking hate that. It's like, dude, you get into a cage in the middle of a fucking arena with dozens of thousands of people cheering and watching you fight another person. Seriously, think about, it's the reason we all love fighting is because it's the purest form of competition between two people. It's besides a gladiator fight to the death, it's the purest form of human competition. It's two people being locked in a space and being like, which one of you is going to walk out of there? That's why we love fighting. And that's why I don't understand when fans treat fighters like they have any idea what it would be like to do that. So I want to put that out there now that, you know, I may sometimes say some things about some fighters. I may talk some shit. I may, you know, because it's fun. But I have nothing but respect and admiration for fighters. They're the fittest athletes on the earth. I mean, those guys work harder than any other athlete, and their sport is definitely the most competitive and the most ruthless, and they get paid the least. So, I mean, I have nothing but admiration for fighters, and even though, you know, I'm going to definitely put out my opinion, I don't ever want it to come off like I'm trying to disrespect a fighter or say that a fighter is scared or bullshit or, you know, try to act like I could have done any better, because obviously I couldn't. And if I stepped in with Jordan Meehan, he would beat me unrecognizable. But you didn't look like you wanted to win, man. You look like you gave up halfway. I mean, you look like you gave up a fight that you were winning at the time. And I don't understand. And so I don't know if he wants to be fighting. He retired for 2 years. And then he came back on Saturday, looked great in the first round, and then gave up. That's what it looked like to me. It looked like he didn't want to be fighting anymore. And so that's kind of sad because he's good and he's still really young. But anyway, moving on. You know, Emil Mack won, and he looked good, and congratulations to him. But now moving on I want to move on to Kennedy versus Gastelum. Now, this is another one of those situations because I'm going to talk some shit about Gastelum. He pisses me off. I feel like he wastes our time, especially like the last card. His fight had to be canceled at the very last minute because he refuses to go on a diet. I mean, the guy should be fighting at 170. He looked great at 185. He did. He looked awesome. But he's not a 185er. He's a 170er. And at 170, he could be a championship level fighter. Go on a fucking diet, dude. Do what you gotta do. Get your weight down to where you can control it and make weight every time. All the other guys do it. All the other fighters make it work. You are not able to eat whatever you want and make 170. You've missed weight multiple times. I'm not sure if it's 3. It's either 3 or... No, it can't be 4 times. It has to be either 2 or 3 times that he's missed weight now at 170. And now the UFC has kind of, you know, before they punished him by making him go up to 185, but he fought Nate Marquardt, who's another one of those guys that's, you know, kind of in between. He could fight at 170 or 185. But this time, they made him fight Tim Kennedy, Tim Kennedy is a 185er. That dude is thick everywhere, and he's big and strong. Now, obviously, Kennedy had also been out for an extended period of time. I feel like he just got so pissed after his last fight against Yoel Romero with that whole controversy that he just kind of took some time off. But he didn't look good. In the first round, he controlled the round. I would have given him that round. I think I did score that round for him because he controlled like the first 3.5 minutes or so. He got him down and he held him up against the cage and he kneed him a lot. You know, he wore out his legs with knees and his ass with knees. But he didn't he never really, he didn't do any damage, and he damn sure didn't, make any huge impression. I mean, I'm pretty sure 2 of the judges ruled the fight 30-27, so they gave Gastelum the first round because once, about 3.5 minutes into the round, somewhere around 4 minutes, Gastelum finally broke away, got some space, and started lighting Kennedy's face up with his hands. Gastelum's got a real nice jab, and he's got a very special ability, especially among the bigger men, to glide in and out. He's got very good footwork, and he is one of those guys, he just looks smooth. When he's throwing his hands, he just looks like he's been boxing his whole life. He glides in, hits you with the jab, glides back out, and he's just always, he's always in the best position to hit you and then get back out of the way before you can hit him. And I don't know how many jabs he landed in this fight, but he tore Kennedy's face all to shit. It started at the end of the first round, and the second and third rounds were just a continuation of that. Kennedy looked tired about halfway through the second round, and he never really recovered. He never really got control of the fight again. And then in the third round, Gastelum finally, put the bow on the president and finished that fight. He TKO'd him, and he looked good doing it. And the one thing that the other thing that kind of annoyed me about this fight was Rogan, and I love Rogan, I really do. I love his stand-up, I love his podcast. I've listened to his podcast, a million times. I've listened to probably, I've spent hours listening to his podcast, and I love Rogan. But he was kind of annoying me in this fight, because he started the fight talking about how Gastelum missed weight, and talking about how, Kennedy was going to try to punish him. He was almost kind of implying that Gastelum, because this was the part of the fight where Kennedy was holding Gastelum up against the fence, he was kind of implying that Gastelum wasn't going to be able to get out of that situation, and that Kennedy was just going to hold him up against the fence and kind of bully him the whole fight to show him that he didn't belong in that division. And then Rogan quickly changes his tune when Gastelum started lighting Kennedy up, and all of a sudden Gastelum then looks so good at 185 that he should consider not cutting weight and stay at 185, which was the first question he asked him after the fight. You look so spectacular at 185, should you be cutting weight to get to 170, or should you just stay here at 185? And I thought that was kind of flip-floppy, and it kind of annoyed me. But honestly, that fight didn't have too much else to talk about. Gastelum's hands and Kennedy's cardio, I felt like were the biggest aspects of that fight. Gastelum looked really good with his hands, very accurate, and Kennedy looked like he didn't quite have the tank. I don't know if that's just because he hadn't fought in so long, and the adrenaline was getting to him. He's back on a main card, back in the UFC, all the lights, and they talk about those adrenaline dumps, and it's one of those variables that sometimes a guy his adrenaline's gonna peak at the wrong time, and after that he's gonna feel like he's just out of energy, and there's not much. I can't think of a worse feeling in sports than to be sitting on the stool between rounds, and I know some people who fight like Jillian McEwen. She's a kickboxer, and she could probably tell us about this feeling, but I can't imagine a worse feeling than sitting on that stool between rounds, knowing you have nothing left to give, and that you have to go back out there for at least 5 more minutes, if not longer, and try to keep another human being from beating your face in. I mean, it's not like in a football game where, if the cornerback is tired and the wide receiver runs right past him down the sideline for a fly pass and, catches a 70-yard touchdown pass, of course that sucks. And of course that's going to feel bad. But not near as bad as a guy who knows he has absolutely nothing left in the tank, and he's got to go out and try to stop another professional killer from beating him to death. And, we forget that that's really what they're facing, because hardly anybody ever dies in MMA. But the fighters all know in the back of their head, this could be it. This could be the night. If I take a punch wrong, or if I hit my head goofy, or something crazy happens, I could die. And if you have no energy left, how are you going to defend yourself? And I just can't imagine a worse feeling than that in sports, or in life. I mean, in life, really, but in sports, is there a worse situation to be in as an athlete? I'll pose that question, and maybe down in the comments somebody can say if they feel like they can think of another situation that would be that gnarly. Anyway, moving on to the next fight I wanted to talk about. And my potential fight of the year candidate. Now, I really do think this is my fight of the year. Cub Swanson versus Doo Ho Choi was insane. It was insane from the very beginning to the very end. That fight was so much fun to watch. It was a perfect dichotomy between their two different styles, because they're both strikers and they both have knockout power. They're both definitely trying to knock the other guy out. I mean, of course, they have other skills. Cub's a black belt in BJJ, and he can submit anybody, but he's not trying to submit people. He's trying to knock people out. I mean, that's what Cub wants to do. And Doo Ho Choi as well. That kid looks like he's 12, but he's got a fucking piston right hand, and I've seen him take people out. So it was a very nice dichotomy, though, between their two styles. Cub's style is obviously, it's like controlled chaos. It's like anarchy in a bottle. He throws fucking cartwheel kicks and corkscrew kicks and wild winging overhands. And then you have Doo Ho Choi, who throws the most perfect piston right hand maybe in the UFC. I mean, he's so quick. His hands just, I mean, there is no wind-up, there's no telegraph, there's no lean, there's nothing. He's from his ready position to hitting you in the face like that. And there's absolutely no wasted motion. There's absolutely no fat in his technique. It's just pure crystal technique. And that dude hits so hard because of his perfect technique. Now, this fight went back and forth. They both almost finished the fight a couple times each, but Swanson just did more damage. Swanson, around the early in the second round, Swanson started to have a lot of fun, and he started throwing all sorts of crazy shit at Doo Ho Choi. He started throwing he threw basically everything that he could think of, and couldn't take the kid out. That kid has a serious chin on him. We'll see how his chin holds up, if he gets in a ton of fights. Guys' chins start to decay, obviously, but at this point, that kid has got a serious chin, because Swanson's got a lot of power, and he was tagging him with full winging overhand shots, and that kid never... he went down at the very, very end of the fight, but it was mostly like he was so hurt, he got off balance and just tripped. But, if that fight had gone another 30 seconds, Swanson probably would have got the stoppage at the very end of the third round. He definitely took control of the fight, and there were people that ruled it a 30-27. I personally had it 29-28. I gave Choi the first round, but Swanson definitely won the fight. It was a clear victory, but it was also so close and so back and forth that I mean, it was really exciting. It had to have been either that fight. My top 3 fights of the year are Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor 1, Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor 2, and now Swanson versus Choi. Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor 2 is probably going to win fight of the year. I would bet that will win fight of the year. In my book, that's number 3 for me. I don't know if that's because of my personal bias, because I'm a huge Nate Diaz fan, and Obviously, watching him, lose to Conor McGregor was not near as fun as watching him beat Conor McGregor in the first time they matched up. So that fight does rank a little higher for me. I would put that as number 2, and I would put Swanson and Choi as number 1. That was fight of the year for me, and it was unbelievable. Those two guys really put everything out there, and you could tell that Swanson was just having the time of his life. You could tell that Swanson was having the best night of his life, pounding this kid. And Choi, man, he just hung in there the whole time. Like, he was getting hit with such big shots. There were 2 or 3 times where I was just like, how is it possible that he's still standing? And then he would hurt Swanson back. He'd land one of those crazy right hands and hurt Swanson back. And that's the other thing is, no matter how hurt Choi got, his technique still remained flawless. He never started flailing. Like, he stayed within himself. He stayed within his technique, and obviously, because of years of practice and repetition, his technique always looked crisp, even when he was hurt. He didn't abandon technique when he got hurt, which I think is a big testament to his training. I mean, whoever trained him in striking obviously knew what they were doing. Now, moving on to the next fight, Cowboy and Matt Brown. That was a great fight, too. That one went back and forth, too. Cowboy definitely won the fight. He was winning the fight the whole time. But Matt Brown had his moments. Matt Brown landed some nice shots. And had Cowboy hurt at one point, maybe could have finished him if things had gone a little different. But Cowboy is super tough and super difficult to finish because he's in really good shape and he's got a good chin. Brown also he cinched up a triangle in the first round. He tried to throw a head kick, or maybe it was the second round, but I want to say it was the first. He tried to throw a head kick and fell, but he fell right into a triangle. And so he cinched that up, and he held it for a little while, but Cowboy's really good at jiu-jitsu as well, and so he was able to defend and get out. And then the kick he landed, that ended the fight was gnarly, because Brown was coming up, and his head was low, and Cowboy literally, Matt Brown flew through the air and landed on his ass. Like, his feet came up off the ground and completely flew through the air. So, that kick was definitely gnarly, and it was a nice exclamation point to the fight, because it was one of those finishes where Cowboy didn't have to throw any follow-up shots. I mean, it was obvious to everyone in the arena that Matt Brown was done, and he was knocked out, and there was no need for anything else. So that was awesome, and anytime you can see Cowboy fight, he's always going to put on a good fight. I've never seen Cowboy in a boring fight, ever, against anybody, and any type of opponent, too, which is a big deal, because, as much as I love the Diaz brothers, and I do, Nick Diaz is my favorite fighter of all time. Nate Diaz, way up there for me. I don't know if he's my second favorite, but he's definitely, in the top 5. They are always talking about, against this guy, I can't have that kind of fight because all he's going to do is try to wrestle me, blah, blah, blah. But even when Cowboy fights the guys who only want to wrestle him, he still has a very dynamic, interesting fight. So, you can't always give those kind of excuses. I mean, Cowboy comes out and he fights every time. And he fights multiple times a year, which I can say is the most frustrating part of being a Diaz fan. Is that they don't ever fight. And I understand why. Because they don't want to get played, and they want to make the money they deserve for they want to have as few fights a year as possible and make as much money as possible. And so you have to have the fan base clamoring for your fights. They have to want to see you fight. And so I totally understand it. It just sucks. Now, the main event was awesome. It was a very good fight. Pettis had some moments, but basically Holloway dominated. And I don't see Holloway not dominating anyone. I don't know how you can watch Holloway's last 10 fights, which is, he's on a 10-fight winning streak, and somehow just got his title shot, which wasn't even a real title shot. because they've been fucking around all year with Conor McGregor. But I don't know how you can watch Max's last 10 fights, watch his evolution, and especially the past 3 or 4 fights where he's gone out against other guys who are destroyers and destroyed them handily and without looking like it took too much effort from him, and not say that he's going to do the same. Aldo looked awesome in his fight against Frankie Edgar. He looked great, and he looked big. He looked strong and muscular. He looked like the old Aldo, and he looked aggressive, and he came out firing, and it was awesome, especially as an Aldo fan, to see that back in him, see that fire back. But Holloway, man, I'm kind of scared for Aldo in this fight with Holloway. Holloway is a motherfucker, and I don't know how you can watch what he's done and not expect him to go out and beat Aldo. Go out and beat Aldo too. I think he's going to. And apparently that fight's going to take place in February. And so I think that I think Holloway's going to take that fight. That's my prediction. This far out, that's my prediction, is that Holloway's going to win that fight. I don't know if it's going to be by stoppage. I mean, Aldo's only been stopped once, and obviously that was a one-punch slept him kind of situation. So Aldo's definitely, I mean, obviously Aldo is a legend for a reason, but Holloway is just, he's a bad motherfucker, man. He's going to take that division, and I think he's going to rule over that division for a while. Because I don't really see any up-and-comers who I think are going to be able to take it from him. So yeah, that was basically it. But I thought the main card of this pay-per-view, this last pay-per-view, was one of the best main cards of the year. It definitely delivered better than some other main cards that were more highly stacked. UFC 200 comes to mind. UFC 200 was kind of boring. And this past card was awesome. Every fight was good. I mean, not every fight was great, but not every fight can be great. But the last 3 fights were all great. The first fight of the card was very good between Mech and Mean. And so it's awesome when a fight card comes through like that, when they actually deliver on the fights. And that one actually even kind of overachieved, as far as I'm concerned, because I wasn't even gonna order it, because I didn't really care about, you know, most of the fights. But I'm so glad that I ordered it, and I had to thank Sully afterward, because I'm like, fuck, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have even ordered that shit. So the next fight coming up is Paige Van Zandt. Paige Van Zandt against Michelle Waterson, which is interesting. Michelle Waterson